Senators raked Goldman Sachs executives over the coals this past week, grilling them for hours about whether the firm made billions betting on the housing meltdown. Politicians accused the company of helping crash the U.S. economy. The public scolding is now raising questions. Were the corporate execs treated fairly by lawmakers?
If you don't want to answer my questions, you don't have to.
You're not really answering my question.
You have an adverse interest to your client when you're selling something to them. Do you have the responsibility to tell that client of your adverse interest? That's my question.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to understand.
No, I think you understand it. I don't think you want to answer.
All right, let's bring in Michael Goodwin, New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor. In today's column, you quoted President Obama recently saying, "I do think at a certain point you've made enough money." You say this statement is more evidence that, in your words, Washington has declared war on capitalism and those who dare to reap its benefits. What about that?
Well, look, Patty, and I think that the hearing that you just showed there was sort of part of a coordinated assault by the Justice Department, by the Securities Exchange Commission, and by Congress on Goldman Sachs and on the financial system in general. And President Obama's remark that you've made enough money now, I think really does point up that this is not just about reform. This is about a larger issue. This is about looking at capitalism, seeing the inequities that invariably come from capitalism and saying, we're going to stop that. So we're going to limit how much people can make. We're going to shrink these institutions. We're going to shrink their ability to trade. We're going to do all kinds of things that shrink their ability to expand, and ultimately, it would mean that they couldn't create jobs, not just that they couldn't make money and couldn't make bonuses, but they wouldn't be able to create jobs and finance the economic growth that this country needs. So it's not only a war on the financial system, it's a wrong-headed war.
You acknowledge that reform is needed on Wall Street, but you object to the financial reform package currently being considered. What specifically are the flaws you see?
Well, I think it goes beyond reform to do what the Democrats in Congress want to do, which has nothing to do with what happened in the last meltdown. So when you talk about taxing the banks, for example, to pay back the TARP, well, the banks all paid back their TARP money, the federal bailout funds. They paid it back with large interest in many cases. So it's really not about making them pay back what they were given to bail out with. It's to punish them because there was an economic crisis. And when you look at what really happened, it wasn't just the banks. It was Fannie and Freddie, the government institutions, really, that sucked up all of the bad mortgages. So it was Congress really encouraging a kind of a free money spending spree. It was the Federal Reserve with low interest rates. So there are a number of sources of what went wrong. Yes, absolutely, Wall Street, the derivatives need to be transparent, so we know what instruments people are trading. We need to know what is the size of leverage so that banks or anybody else doesn't get in over their head and then need to be bailed out because they're too big to fail. So clearly, and I think there's a real consensus on Wall Street even, there's a consensus in Congress to do those sorts of things. But when you say you're making too much money, that's a whole other kettle of fish, one that has nothing to do with reform, but has everything to do with punishing capitalism.
Your column points out that these moves against Wall Street, as well as the stimulus bill and the health care overhaul, the bailouts, they were all telegraphed to us in advance of the president's election when he made that comment about how good it is to spread the wealth around. So you think all of those things are pieces of the same puzzle? Absolutely.
Well, I just take the health care for things, which I know everyone is so familiar with, but when you see it as part of a pattern, I think it does make more sense. When, again, there was a consensus about some of the reforms that needed to be done. Not all of them, but there were issues about portability, about people who are sick and who need to have insurance at that point, that there should be some way they can get it. But that's not what happened. What happened was an overhaul, a kind of takeover to sort of turn the insurance companies into utilities to ration not only the care that they have to deliver, but also the prices at which they can charge it. That's not a reform. That's a takeover. And I think something is at work like that with the banks. It's not reforming what's broken. It's about seeing it as an opportunity to expand government power, to limit the private sector. And unfortunately, unfortunately, people like to kind of demonize those who make a big profit or something like that. But in fact, that is part of what capitalism is about. The rough edges, absolutely, we should try to a certain extent to smooth them over so there aren't these great disparities. But we have to be careful in the meantime that we don't take away this great engine of job creation, because that is, the capitalist system does inspire individuals. And when you start telling individuals your labors can't be rewarded, we're going to limit what you can do, what you can make, then you begin to sort of temper the fires of capitalism, and that is what's going to lead not to job creation, but more job loss.
All right, Michael Goodwin, New York Post and Fox News contributor, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.